Expert. We do want to bring in right now a Middle Eastern expert to talk to Lisa and I about the mentality we have been discussing. Walid Phares with me now on the phone. So Walid, always glad to have you as part of the conversation, adding your perspective. You heard Lisa and I discussing this idea of, is this a copycat? Is this someone, again, more or less inspired by the destructive nature of the self-proclaimed Islamic State? Based on what you know, what is your take?
At this point in time, with all the information that we have, and I'm sure that the government has more, the fact that he's originally from Kuwait may count, but may not, because there are many people who are born here and then they have, been indoctrinated. The fact that he has performed an act that ISIS has called for, meaning attacking U.S. military, U.S. security across the nation, is something probably closer to my analysis. And this is, let's remember, something that was done in 2009 in the United States before a similar installation was attacked in Arkansas with one soldier killed. So this is a sort of a copycat for that one. That tells me that it is of jihadi nature if indeed all that information corresponds.
Walid, Lisa brought up this fantastic point that whom we understand to be the shooter, Mohammed Yusuf Abdulaziz, was not on the FBI's list. What does that say to you? Not on the watch list?
That does not surprise me at all. I've been warning for the last 2 to 3 years that many of the attacks to come, unfortunately this was one of them, may be launched by individuals who are not on our list for the simple reason that this guy who's 24-year-old, I mean, he must have been indoctrinated, some 6-7 years ago. We have the possibility of hundreds of these individuals. Now, when these individuals are...
Walid, I don't mean to cut you off, but when you say 24 and he must have been indoctrinated 6 or 8 years ago, meaning he's too young, essentially, to show up on the FBI list.
On the one hand, and the FBI list, can grow to a certain point. I mean, do we have 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 people on their list? I think we have in the hundreds of individuals who have traveled. How does the FBI put them on their list? Either by going on social media and detect narrative of the jihadists, or know about information that they have traveled to Afghanistan, traveled to Syria, traveled to Iraq. But this is only a minority of the individuals who are indoctrinated. So let's not be surprised that he was not on their list. Now, if he would have moved, had encounters with law enforcement, went to jail and back, he automatically should have been on their list.
Okay, but to you, it's not surprising that he wasn't at least...
No, I mean, the fact that there's no age limit for getting on the list. You could be 15, you could be 16, you could be 11 and still be on that list. I don't think there's an age limit for it. And I think that the fact that he's had no encounters with police, sure, if he'd had an encounter, he'd definitely be on it. But that's sort of the stealth sort of person that we're really worried about. That person who doesn't have an encounter with the police, who's nice to his neighbors, all of that, and is still indoctrinated in a copycat mode. And I just keep coming back to that word. And there's no age limit on that.
Walid, based on that, go ahead.
No, they could have been. I mean, the issue is if the administration has allowed 5, 6 years ago the detection of an ideology, our list would have been much greater. But the administration dismissed the ideological identification. So now only those who have acted before or encountered law enforcement should be on the list. We cannot, put people on the list just because they have ideas, because we don't have a law for that.
So, Walid, let me ask you something. After the shooting in Paris, France, the Charlie Hebdo, we had President Obama saying, of course, we have Muslims who are living in the U.S. but who are integrated. And that is why, essentially, the implication is it happens less in the U.S. than in other parts of the world. Do you see it that way?
No, I think this is an academic error of judgment. It's either too wide or too narrow. It's either, all the Muslim community has to be looked at, and are they integrated or not integrated, or really just very few individuals who are criminal. But there's something in between. Those who have been indoctrinated, so should they be in Denmark or in Alaska, it's the same. It's the power of that machine that creates indoctrination and radicalization. Yes, in Europe they have a higher number because that machine in Europe has been working for the previous 10 years or 2 decades. So it's a question of history in Europe. That's longer than us.
As far as social media and something that Lisa and I were discussing, this decentralized power, this destructive ideology is easier to spread thanks to social media. On the flip side, I am assuming it makes law enforcement's job slightly easier to track people as well, right? It's a two-edged sword.
It's true. Ideas travel in different manners, either by books, by phone, by cell phone, and now, of course, on internet and the advanced internet, including social media, Twitter, Facebook, and the rest. It's, on the one hand, easier for them to recruit and easier for law enforcement to actually find them. Easier for the jihadists to multiply and easier for those NGOs, anti-jihadists, to find them. So technology gives both sides an edge, an advanced edge.
But social media, though, too, again, a two-edged sword. But if he is not responding, say he's checking in and he's looking at different sites, but he's not actually responding, that wouldn't catch the eye of the FBI. You see what I'm saying? If there's no interaction, but just a watching, that wouldn't catch the eye of the FBI. Do you agree with that?
That's a great question. Actually, those who are reading and not responding are in the tens of thousands, and obviously that's a demography that is very big, exposed to the ideology. Now, at one point, any person who's indoctrinated, and that is almost scientific analysis, will have to interact with somebody somehow. It doesn't have to be in the same chat room. It doesn't have to be on the same, on the same site, but they have to validate. The term validation, meaning asking somebody else, is that true? Do you think is this legitimate or not? That is where the FBI law enforcement should go, the validation process.
Now, I would be very curious to see in the coming days whether this person, the alleged killer, interacted on social media in the last few days or even the last month. That wouldn't be probably enough time to catch the eye of the FBI, but enough time to get that validation that we were talking about.
As far as
let me put it that way. If he was engaging before back and forth, and then in the last few days he got hot, as we say, quote unquote, then yes, the FBI and other law enforcement and NSA would have detected him. But apparently that was not the case this time.
At least going forward, this brings up, again, the question of privacy and security, especially when we're talking about social media. And, of course, many people upset that the NSA is tracking so much. But then in a case like this, it would be great to know.
And, the next thing the FBI is going to do is they're going to go to his apartment, his house, whatever, and they're going to look at his computer. They're going to look at all of the things. Because I just think that if he got hot in the last couple of days, the FBI might not have had time to put him on that list.
Fair enough. Wiehl joining us there. She is our top legal analyst here. Walid Phares joining us on the phone, our Middle Eastern expert.